Welcome to another episode of 2Doc2Talk Beyond Medicine, where we explore people, stories, innovations that remodel the modern healthcare. Today we are privileged to sit and talk with the great innovator in the field of limb reconstruction and lengthening, Dror Paley.
He's a visionary surgeon, educator, innovator, and now citizen of Poland, who changed the life of thousands of patients around the world. It's a real honor for us to have you here in 2Doc2Talk podcast, Dr. Paley.
Thank you.
So at the beginning, you've pioneered so many surgical techniques, but let's listen how it all started. Why actually you chose orthopedics instead of like neurosurgery or any other profession? Why we ended up here like this?
I think I knew I was going to be a surgeon when I was 14 years old. I expressed to my father I wanted maybe to go into medicine. This was when I was in high school. And so we had a family friend, Ed Shapiro, and he was a general surgeon. My father arranged for me to go in and watch surgery with him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it was love at first sight. I mean, I remember the first operation was a cholecystectomy, and I watched him open the belly and take out the gallbladder. And the next one was a small bowel resection for a tumor. And, you know, he warned me I might get sick, and I didn't get sick. You know, it's like, wow, that is so cool. And, but I forgot about that and went to medical school. And then, you know, I think usually in your third year is when you start seriously thinking about which subspecialty. Mm-hmm. And I was in we had one half-day session on pediatric orthopedics. All of medical school, one half-day session. I mean, it's unbelievable. I spend my whole life now in pediatric orthopedics, and the total representation of pediatric orthopedics was one half day of all of my medical school. Right, incredible. And I was sitting in the audience, and the resident brought out patients, and he would bring them out, do physical exam, explain things, and he brought out a patient who walked across the stage, and she had what we would all recognize now as a Trendelenburg limp. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I looked at this patient, and he asked, okay, can somebody tell me what's wrong with this patient? I have no idea why I raised my hand, but I raised my hand, and he said, signaled to me to answer, and I said, this patient has a weak gluteus medius. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the class looked at me, and this guy looked at me like, how did you know that? And then I looked at myself and said, I have absolutely no idea how I knew that, but I knew it immediately. And I realized that I had a keen sense for mechanics, human mechanics. And I saw what she was doing. The only explanation could be that the gluteus medius was paralyzed or weak or something like that. And that's what was the case. And I started reading. So I was actually so surprised by my own answer. I started reading about human mechanics, and I loved it. Couldn't get enough. And I think that's when I knew I wanted to go into orthopedic surgery. But I had never done a rotation. I'd never done anything except make this one observation, and it was just so intuitive to me. And that is what got me curious.
During your childhood, did you like to play with tools and open toys and just with more skills than actually?
I mean, my favorite game was the Erector set.
Okay.
Absolute favorite thing. I could spend hours and hours building different models, buildings, things with the Erector set. So, I mean, in retrospect, the making of a great Ilizarov surgeon, right?
Yeah.
So Erector set, I think in Europe you call it Meccano set. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Probably,
yeah. So, nuts, bolts, wrenches, all of this. Yeah, I loved it.
Correct. We are also great fans of mechanics. So
Yeah.
that as an orthopedic surgeon, you need to have some skills of wrenches and screws.
Yeah, and from when we look at our colleagues that they are residents, sometimes they are lacking this skills of playing with power tools, with tools, and we tell them just buy a set from IKEA and just fix it and then just mount it and dismount it many times
and do this 5 times.
So they might have a big knowledge, and theory, but they are lacking some skills, and that's something you develop throughout your whole life from the very beginning as a child. I think that's very important, and to now not only use your thumbs and your phone, but also remember that you can do many things, like we like engines, like cars, and so that's why it gives a lot of benefit in the OR. That when we, fixing cars and dismounting engines and transmissions, and this is very helpful, I think, in our perspective.
Yeah, my father was a mechanical engineer, and he was Mr. Fix-It and Build It. He built a lot of we didn't have a lot of money, but he built a lot of the furniture in the house. He built the fireplace at our home. He built so many things. I thought that was normal. That you just build and fix things, and and I was the oldest boy, so I often helped him, and he showed me. So I grew up using power tools and wrenches and screwdrivers and drilling holes and cutting wood and metal. And my father was a metallurgist too, so in his profession. So yeah, this no question. In retrospect, this was great training to train your brain to like those things. You're right. I get residents and fellows come through, and they don't know which way to turn a wrench. It's not intuitive to them, and it's very strange to me because I don't think about which way to turn a wrench. I never turn it the wrong way. You must have been doing this all my life,
right.
But they never did that. So for them, they have to say things like righty tighty, lefty loosey. I mean, I never think of that, but it is helpful if you got some of these skills as a child.
Yeah. So you mentioned this defining moment in your life during your school when you recognize that you have this ability to recognize human, mobility, human mechanics. But you also mentioned about Elizarov, and we know that you met many mentors during your way. Who was the mentor whose impact was the biggest in your life? Who put the most on your decisions?
Influenced you the most?
Good question. Obviously, my introduction to the Elizarov method, philosophy, technology, all of this was a very big event and, aspect of my life. It wasn't so much the man, though. The man had an institute, had an entire apparatus, had other people involved. So it wasn't him directly, although I spent, some time with him in the early years. But there was also other people that were using his ideas, his methods, who had this big impact on me. A very big impact was Maurizio Catani, one of the first Italians to use his method. And it was easier to learn from Maurizio than directly from Elizarov. Yeah. But, it's a generation gap, language gap, culture gap, accessibility gap. all of the above that made Maurizio, easier for me to learn from. But I also got to benefit from getting to know Lazarov. And as you probably know, I learned Italian, I learned Russian, and this made it possible for me to communicate directly with both of these individuals. Lazarov did not speak any other language. And Maurizio spoke French and Italian and did not speak English when I first met him. He does now, but...
you had to accommodate.
The Italians in those days also learned French in school, and I learned French in school. So we communicated in French until I learned Italian, which didn't take that long. So probably about, 2 to 3 months into my stay in Italy, we kind of naturally transitioned into Italian and never spoke French again.
Okay. But what about your residency? Like, I know that you get to know Dr. Salter and McIntosh. Am I right? So could you tell us more about?
I was very fortunate to do my medical school in Toronto, which is truly one of the best medical schools in North America. There's a medical school where Grant's Atlas was from, and so many others. So I had great foundation, great medical training. And then I was at Johns Hopkins for a year, and that was also very influential on my training. And then I went back to Toronto, and I did a residency in orthopedics in Toronto at what I would call the end of an era. There was a period of time of about 15, 20 years where Toronto was the most dominant and the most acclaimed orthopedic residency training program in the world, and had a all-star team, dream team of orthopedics. I mean, you named a couple. Sure. Bob Salter needs no introduction.
Exactly.
David McIntosh, who invented the pivot shift sign and contributed so much to sports medicine and our understanding of ligaments. The list goes on. Colin Mosley invented, the earlier method of straight line graph for predicting leg length difference. Norris Carroll contributed so much to clubfoot. Bob Gillespie, who was an incredible surgeon and in pediatric orthopedics and did amazing stuff. Bob Jackson, who was the first person in North America to start doing arthroscopy. He brought it from Japan, from Watanabe. Ed Simmons, who was doing, vertebrectomies and doing incredible spinal deformity surgery long before pedicle screws existed. And Mercer Rang, from CP surgery, Alan Gross from allografts, and Marvin Tile, famous pelvic acetabulum fractures, Joe Schatzker. I could go on. There's
that's amazing.
That's really, in one program. And I haven't even mentioned everybody.
Exactly.
Okay. There's still many more.
And we all know,
Wally Babechko and
I would actually do everything to,
so, Bob McMurtry and Hans, it just, it was, I really consider myself very fortunate. John Kostwick, in spine. If I keep going, I could spend an hour just mentioning every single name. And we were exposed to these people. It was a 6-year program. It's exposed to these people day in, day out for 6 years. You went to conferences with them. You came out of this thing so strong in orthopedics, a foundation that was so rock solid. And, it showed. Look, I remember I wrote the in-training exam. That's an exam in North America, which compares your year of orthopedic residence to every other orthopedic resident from your year, from year 1 to 5. You know what my score was every year? Every year, the whole residency, 99th percentile. And I attribute that to the environment I was in. Sure, I'm sure I get a little credit for it, but it was also, I was stimulated by an all-cast, all-star dream team of orthopedics.
They were not limiting their knowledge. They were actually wanted to share it with their residents.
They were great at sharing it, but actually they were closed-minded in their own way. I'll tell you a funny story. When I came back from spending time, in Italy with Maurizio, before I went to Lazarev, and I came back and said, I'm going to go do this fellowship to go study this Soviet technique, and with Lazarev. Marvin Tile, who's a great mentor of mine, he just passed away. A wonderful man, amazing person, great, one of the best teachers ever. He said to me, he says, Dror, you're a smart guy. What's a smart guy like you going to go do, waste your time studying some obscure Soviet technique, and so on. But this was 1985, and we had a very, very negative view of anything behind the Iron Curtain. And so Marvin was one of the most open-minded. He was a student of Letournel, in France. And by the way, that was the other thing in Toronto. They brought in all these incredible people like Letournel,
from France.
Yeah, Letournel from France, Bombelli from Italy, and so on. And of course, lots of Americans. All these people.
What was the reason? Ontario in Canada? Why it's not the HSS in New York? Why Ontario?
We were way above HSS in New York. Okay, they had nothing compared to us. I will tell you that in 1985, their program in New York couldn't even hold a candle to our program. Okay, so and I'm obviously very proud to have trained in Toronto. And of course, to Americans, Canada is just another foreign medical school. They don't really, there's a bit of a arrogance there. But even though I'm an American now, I can say that. But yes, the honestly, in 1985, Canada was the pinnacle, the top of the mountain. I remember Bob Salter used to say, he used to talk to Mencken. Mencken was the head at Harvard program. And, and Mencken would say to him that Harvard is the hub of orthopedics. The hub is the center of a wheel. And Salter says, you're right. And Toronto is at the tip of the spokes. You know what moves faster? Things move faster at the tip of the spokes. So it was always a rivalry between those two schools. But it was actually a very character building, knowledge building, thinking building, cognitive building experience to be in Toronto.
So what at that time between this all-star group, what makes you believe that reconstruction and the lengthening and the reconstruction surgery, especially on the kids, will go so far beyond what you had before?
And what you witnessed?
I don't think I gave it that much thought. I think, so I first heard about the Lazarev technique because of one of these surgeons they brought into town, Renato Bombelli, who was at that time doing the most advanced, hip osteotomy surgery, hip osteotomy reconstruction surgery. Had written his book on the biomechanics of the hip, and I had read that book. And in fact, I read all 3 versions. He had 3 editions of his book. And I had just finished reading his first edition when he came into town as a visiting professor. And we hosted him. I was at the Toronto East General Hospital as a third-year resident. We hosted him, and we were presenting cases to him of interesting cases. And we presented a case of a tibial infected bone defect. And we were planning to amputate the leg.
Mm-hmm.
And we just asked, Dr. Bombelli, what would you do for this in Italy? By the way, he wasn't treating trauma at that point in his career. But we asked, what would you do in Italy? And he got up there with his thick Italian accent and his hands moving all over the place, describing this technique where you cut the bone and then you gradually pull it down and you bring it to the other side and it meets the other end. Obviously, describing what we would now call bone transport.
Yeah.
That word I don't even think existed at the time,
Wow.
just so you know. I actually think I invented that word, in the mid-1980s. But that time it didn't have that name, okay? The Italians called it bifocal treatment. The Russians called it bifocal treatment. I'm the one who gave it the name bone transport. Little known fact.
We are big fans of bone transport. We love this technique. It's something, it makes you always see every case that it's unbelievable,
It is. It's an incredible,
It's an incredible technique.
And just to think about that, I mean, who would think that you can move it through space, through the soft tissues.
For a really long distance, like 20 centimeters.
Like it's
In November 1983, I heard the first description of bone transport ever given probably in North America, in Toronto.
Okay.
And I went over to Bombelli at the end. First of all, there were no questions. So I felt that everybody knew what this was except for me. And I went over to Bombelli during the coffee break and I asked him about this. I just didn't know anything about this, wanted to go read about it. And he took a pen out and drew it on a napkin and explained to me how this technique worked. By the time he finished, I realized not one person in the room knew what he was talking, and they were all just being polite and not saying anything. And we amputated the leg the next week. But I was curious enough, and I asked him to send me some material. And he says, are you coming to the American Academy meeting in February? I said I was. He says, I'll bring you some material. And he didn't forget. He brought me, I went to the hip society meeting. I met him, and he gave me that, and that changed my life. Meanwhile, I went and I researched Ilizarov in the library. And the only library in Canada that had material on this was one in Ottawa, but I was from Ottawa. And when I went up to visit my parents in Ottawa, I went to this library and got the original journals, photocopied them. It wasn't like today where you can just get a PDF. And the only part I could understand was the English abstract. These were all in Russian journals. And I couldn't believe how much stuff there was. There were so many publications about this guy. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I mean, I never even heard of this guy before. And that's what got me going on this journey. And I pursued it. Actually, I still had 2.5 years of residency to complete. But I started this became a little hobby to research on the side. And it was not easy to get information. And then I actually got a research grant and decided to do it on this. And I was able to manage to get equipment. And I did some biomechanical work at the University of Vermont in Burlington. And I published that paper comparing the Ilizarov frame to other external fixators for fracture treatment. Later repeated that same experiment for a limb lengthening model. All of that's published, by the way. So I got into this big time and then decided I'm going to go over and see this. I went to Italy in 1985, spent a week there, and then came back from that and told my wife we're going for 6 months. And then she told me I'm pregnant. And she said, okay, well, it'll be the first 6 months of the year, not the second 6 months of the year. And she was pregnant the whole time we were in Europe. Actually had to go back a month early, and then I came back. So I went from beginning of July 1986, came home December 21st, 1986. My son was born December 22nd. So, so it was a very memorable 6 months. We did this with our 2.5-year-old son, Benjamin, and one on the way.
Maybe not as similar as we did, because we also had to took our families, for this like more than 1 year fellowship in West Palm Beach. But it was a great time we spent there, and
also both of us. We had 2 kids.
But speaking of innovations, and so how do you think we can balance the innovation of surgery with the patient safety and reproducibility of this technique? Because you're the best person that can answer this question, because we know as you refine so many surgical techniques, and you're still have this big hungry to develop them and change them. So what is the like?
And we know that you are redefining them every day. So how to
between breakfast and dinner.
So I think that an innovation in surgery is a very interesting thing. It's not a new thing. I mean, dates back a long, long way. I mean, so many surgeons have been great innovators and invented new ideas, new techniques, new devices, all of these things. And innovation's an interesting thing. I think that you cannot teach innovation. I can teach people how to do a surgery. I can teach people principles. I can teach people mechanics. I can teach people the actual technique. I cannot teach them innovation. And innovation, some people have it, some people don't.
So you need to be born with this.
I think, I think it's innate. It's, we all have different superpowers. For me, innovation is one of my superpowers, and I don't know why I have it, but I have never been able to look at anything without thinking of, new ideas and so on. And I think when I was younger, it used to get me in trouble. I still remember when I was a second-year resident, and I was doing some research in the lab on rabbits with bone marrow, and I had the idea that bone marrow could be injected into bone defects, and then it would regenerate defects. I had a model in the the rabbit radius, and I did this. It's published in Clinical Orthopedics, 1986, and I was the first person actually to do that. Use just bone marrow without bone, for that. Now it's done all the time. People, now they concentrate it and so on. I suggested this. I said, I'm doing this research, blah, blah, blah. I suggested, what do you guys think about injecting bone marrow? I was just a resident. I got reported by the attending surgeon that I was proposing experimental surgery to inject bone marrow, which, by the way, is a regular technique nowadays, but I got reported for suggesting this idea in humans. Isn't that amazing? And all I was doing is academically discussing it, because I was not an attending. I'm not the one who's going to do it. And so, I mean, innovation, it is a balance between what can you do as part of normal development of therapeutic surgery and so on, and what requires an IRB and what requires a protocol and so on. That's a tough one, because honestly, if I had to do an IRB for every surgery I invented, or even modifications of operations, none of this would have happened. And not just my ideas, but many ideas. The Salter osteotomy would never have happened. And, so many operations that have names on them, none of them would have happened. So that's not how it's done. It's still not done that way. And I think a lot of times, where the experimental part comes is when we want to study it and we want to do research, comparing this group to that group and so on. But innovation occurs and progress occurs. And we, but what doesn't happen is you don't wake up one day and invent something like the super hip procedure, which has 50 steps. You may come up with the first 10 steps. Okay? You may come up with an idea in the beginning of it. And then what happens is procedures evolve. So when you look at it retrospectively, you say, how did you ever come up with that? The thing is, you never came up with the whole thing at once. You came up with part of it, and then you notice that there was this and this problem, and you improved on it, and you improved on it, and you improved on it. And then when you get to the finished results, whatever number of years later, you look like a genius that you thought of all this. Well, but the thing is, you did it in a stepwise fashion. So most things are not some incredible epiphany where someone, figures out, I'm sure Einstein didn't think of E = mc squared. He just woke up one morning with that. I think he worked through the proofs and so on, and gradually and eventually, come up with things. Yeah. So a lot of ideas are like that. For example, I remember the multiplier method. Okay. And, I'd been wrestling with this. I was convinced there was a mathematical formula to predict limb length discrepancy and bone length. And I had an idea that it was related to the waypoints, like certain percentage of growth by each age. And then, but I spent probably many years thinking of this, didn't really quite come up with it. And then I was sitting on an airplane in a very uncomfortable middle seat in economy class on the way to Manchester, England, en route to Belfast, speak at a conference. And I think maybe the hypoxia, you talk about breathing increased level of oxygen. I was probably breathing less oxygen. And I think it stimulated the idea that, what if I divide the length at maturity by the length at any age? I wonder if that's different for different percentiles. I got to the other end and phoned my research assistant, woke him up at night because I landed in the morning and he was just going to sleep and said, yeah, you're not going to sleep. I said, you need to crunch these numbers and this, and I'm taking a flight now to Belfast, and here's the fax number, because we didn't have email back then. And, this was in the 90s. And I said, please fax the results. And by the time I got there, I got the fax, and it proved that it was percentile independent. And this was such an incredible thing. But I thought about this problem for many years. I didn't just come up with it on the airplane, the final solution I came up in the airplane, but it was a result of, looking at this problem for a long time.
And I think your subconscious also works in the background on many topics that you it's like your ChatGPT agent, somewhere behind your, brain that is working when you are asleep or when you do other tasks. He's still trying to crunch this problem.
Yeah, I recently read, what's his name? Blocking on the name there. But I read a book about the singularity by The name will come to me, but and this is by a great innovator. And one of the things he talks about is that when he innovates, he visualizes. He talks about visualization. Visualization, he talks about vivid dreams, actually seeing things. I'm guessing it's in the REM part of sleep. And then going through it in his mind, almost in a conscious fashion, but he's asleep.
Before you go to sleep, you have to think about the problem that you want to
Exactly.
solve, and then it will come in your dream.
Exactly.
Solution.
In the morning.
This, I didn't realize for years, was happening to me all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I think that's what happened on the plane. I think I finally fell asleep in that uncomfortable middle seat.
Correct.
But not deeply asleep or whatever. And the computer was working.
Yeah.
You know, and I now am very conscious of this. I actually intentionally preload the data. No, I'm serious. Before I go to sleep, before I go to sleep, I tell myself I have a problem to solve, maybe a surgery the next day or this or that, and I try and solve it, which immediately puts me to sleep. You know, because you're exhausted and your brain's not working well, and I go to sleep very quickly, which is good. And then, if I'm lucky, sometime in the wee hours of the morning, I will see the solution. It usually relates to an anatomic problem and some type of surgical solution. And I will go through it. And many times I've actually practiced the operation in my sleep 4 or 5 times, seen every structure, figured out how to navigate through them, what to do, and I wake up with a new operation. And that has happened to me. Now I'm much more aware of it, and I come up with the solutions almost upon demand, you know, which I never used to. Before it was very accidental.
You can train it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now I'm aware of it. Yeah. And so now I've kind of, and as I've read about this, you know, it is more of that. And I think that this dates back to something I did in my high school. So I was a very avid chess player. And, you know, in chess, you do visualization. You do it consciously when you're awake. Yes. And you look at the board and you visualize, if I do this, then they'll do this. And then I'm going to do this, and they'll do this. And then you'll think another combination. And the better you are at chess, the more combinations you can go through and analyze the board and look for what the best option, not one move ahead, 10 moves ahead, you know, and so on. And that's what really good chess players do. And I did that in my teens. And I did it, you know Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule. I did it. I did my 10,000 hours of chess, no question. Probably at the expense of my social life. And I did this all through high school and played on the chess team and was good. And the whole team was really good. And we won many championships. And I was really good at visualizing, to the point that I could sit with a colleague of mine and have a chess game without a board. So when we used to travel as a chess team, on a plane or a bus, we didn't have a board. And so we would just write down the moves. Yeah. And we frequently played 40 plus move games, 40 plus without losing our place. And later we would replay the game because we had written all the moves down and there was no mistakes. Now, my brain can't do that now. I can, unfortunately, you know, but I think I did that so much. I don't know if you ever saw this TV series, Queen's Gambit. Yes. Yeah. But, you know, she's looking up at the ceiling and moving the pieces. And it's exactly what I did. It's a real thing. I use that skill in inventing operations. I've invented more than 100 surgical procedures, which is maybe more than most, if not all, surgeons who've ever invented new procedures. That's unusual. But I think that's how I do it, is through visualization.
It's just advanced preoperative planning. And then you need to go to your art, just repeat it.
Right. But I plan in my head.
Yeah.
You know,
With no
even though I
tools.
teach,
Yeah.
so everyone knows my book, my principles, deformity correction, and all this. I never did it that way. I still don't do it that way. I just see it. But I worked on that to make it objective so anybody could do it. And so I came up with how to draw these lines and so on and so on.
So
but I was
you can
doing
standardize it and share it globally.
correct, and it's objective, and but I do it intuitively.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of my mentors, Maurizio Catagni, you know, he used to poo-poo this. It just it's not necessary. He said, you can just see it. And I said, yes, Maurizio, but you can't teach that to anybody. So you have to come up with an objective way to teach people what you intuitively know. And it's actually from that that I developed the objective way to prove what I just knew. Now, maybe Einstein knew it was E equals MC squares and then had to come up with the proof to show it. I don't know. I never got to ask him.
Same way.
Okay, so stepping out from the hour, so let's talk about the institute. You know, we know that you founded a Paley Institute in West Palm Beach. Then it was Warsaw, Middle East, and now South America. What is what is your vision behind going global?
Well, so I think it's important to just go back for a minute and review kind of where I practiced. So, you know, I moved from Toronto to Baltimore for my first real job, and it was at University of Maryland as an employed physician, working up the academic ladder from assistant to associate to full professor, youngest full professor there at age 39. And, you know, and then I got offered to head up an institute that was going to be built for me, and they built a $25 million building for me at Sinai Hospital, and I moved there, was director of that for 8 years. And there I was employed not by university, but by a hospital, but again, an employed physician. That's 22 years of my life in Baltimore, and 2 amazing jobs. But in both jobs, I was really not in business. I was employed. I was on fixed salary. The second job had a very small incentive. It's pretty much, you know, like most models at universities today. And then due to a series of circumstances that at the time were very challenging, but now I realize that they were beshert. Beshert is a Yiddish word which means destined to be. I was forced to leave Baltimore and start something else. And I moved to Florida. And I ended up in a private setting for the first time in my life. Okay. So I give you that background because prior to that, I had no business experience. Okay. I was an employed physician. And even all the product development I did, I always just did it as,
consultant.
Go to a company, they do all the work, take all the risk, and if you're lucky, you get some consulting money or royalties. Again, no business savvy. And so here I was at the age of 53 for the first time in a private setting. And boy, did I make many mistakes. And but I had a really amazing practice. And my ability to innovate allowed me to innovate in business.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that, though. I mean, I'm telling you this in retrospect. And, the first 4 years, I was really in solo practice. But then I started bringing on partners. And I made most of my big mistakes in my first 4 years. Mm-hmm. Despite that, I was always financially successful in that practice. But I did so many things that, in retrospect, I probably lost millions of dollars because of bad decisions on my part in those first 4 years. But I have no regrets because I learned so much. And the good thing is, I guess I do learn from my mistakes, and I started figuring out how to do things, and how to be successful at doing them, not just in surgery, which I obviously was at that, but now in business, which I had never taken a course until this day in business. I had no background and so on. And I started bringing on other surgeons because what I had created was a turnkey system. I'd created a system which now worked. And as I brought on surgeons, they didn't have to do what I did.
Yeah.
They could just walk in, and immediately I helped make them successful in private practice. And I first brought on Craig Robbins. A year later, I brought on David Feldman. A year or two later, I brought on Tom Minus, Brad Lamb, and so on. Now, these were big fish. These were people like myself who attracted medical tourism, who were well known, and who took a leap of faith to come and join me because they saw how successful I was. As I brought on each surgeon, it became easier and easier for me to convince people that I could make them successful in private practice. And that turnkey system became more and more turnkey. And, and I realized, look, what do surgeons want? They want lots of operating room time that's efficient. They want enough clinic time. They want a financial system that, is incentivizing, that allows them to benefit from the fruits of their labor. And, and they wanted enough staff to be able to do these things and still, delegate enough and have a comfortable life. They wanted lots of patience. And we provided that for every single surgeon. When you do that, there's no fighting, no arguments. There's no turf wars, no jealousies. And you end up with a system really works. Well, it builds on itself. We now have 28 surgeons. We're completing our 17th year, since I moved down there. And we have our own dream team, of orthopedics. I remember I was trained in Toronto. I remember what a dream team is like. And I really wanted to build
a new all-star
dream team.
Yeah. So New Toronto is in West Palm now?
But it's in private practice. And where we encourage academia, we encourage publications, we encourage research. One of our doctors still has an R01 NIH grant. Many of us have grants and do research. And the difference was our doctors are not institutionalized. That's what I call what I was. I was institutionalized for 22 years. We have a different I word, incentivized. So we are incentivized. One of the things I learned from all this is that I had elevated my institution but my institution had not elevated me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Correct.
I had loyalty to my institution. My
Mhm.
institution had no loyalty to me. And as I looked at this, I said, something's totally wrong with this model.
Mm-hmm.
And look, let's take an example, Sinai Hospital. Okay, I was at University of Maryland before.
Mm-hmm.
You got to understand, University of Maryland lives in the shadow of its big cousin, Johns Hopkins,
Mhm.
in the same city.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard of Johns Hopkins.
Hopkins.
Not everybody's, you know.
Mm-hmm. True.
But I made University of Maryland famous. Okay. Then I moved to Sinai. Nobody's heard of Sinai
Mhm.
Hospital, community hospital in Baltimore. I made it a destination hospital. There's a ranking system in the United States from a news journal called U.S. News and World
yeah.
Report. And every year they rank the hospitals in the U.S. HSS was always number one for orthopedics. Sinai Hospital had never been ranked ever before.
Mm-hmm.
I made them number 2 in orthopedics. That's a huge
Leap.
thing,
Yeah.
okay? And after I left, they're nothing in orthopedics, okay? They're not up there at all. But my whole point is that we elevate our institutions. The institutions don't elevate us. Just because you're a doctor, let's say at Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins, that doesn't make you a good surgeon, okay? But if you're a good surgeon at those places, you make those places great, okay? But you can make any place great. So I realized I had a special practice, and I didn't need a Johns Hopkins or a Cleveland Clinic or an HSS to make me, attract patients from all over the country or the world. They were coming to a local community hospital. So when I did move, I moved to St. Mary's Medical Center, a 90-year-old hospital that was not known probably outside a radius of about 30 kilometers from the hospital. And I've made it a world destination hospital. Okay. And patients come there from 110 countries and all 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started looking for doctors, I literally asked myself the question, so who's the Dror Paley of spine surgery? Oh, David Feldman. Let me get him. Who's the Dror Paley of cartilage repair surgery? Tom Minus. Let's go after him. And the list went on. Now, some of it was serendipitous, but all these guys are in that category. They're all number 1 or in the top 10 for their subspecialty. And they're not only known locally, regionally, nationally, and some of them internationally. And that's who I targeted. And I targeted these guys and continue to target these guys. So, our latest addition is Dr. Munjed Almuderis from Australia. Named Australian of the Year and, the number 1 osseointegration surgeon in the world, and so on and so on. That's who I go after. And I created a model that does that. And then to support that model, I created all the other services that you need. Okay. Physical therapy. Okay. Orthotics, prosthetics, radiology. But instead of having those services being owned by the university or the hospital, they're owned by us. Why should you give away millions of dollars of these services to your institution? So I said, we're incentivized, not institutionalized. So we are the institution, and that's why it's called an institute. Okay. Paley Orthopedic and Spine Institute. Okay. But our doctors are all incentivized, and they're all incentivized to, they're not taxed like universities tax you 20, 30%. They're their own cost centers. They're all encouraged to, to run their own business within ours. And to grow it and to support these docs, we even created new business models that didn't exist before. I've actually published these business models recently in peer-reviewed journals. One of the most famous of which is the junior-senior model, where we got to bring young people in, and we got, we got to pass on our own practices and our legacy and we succession planning. And so in order to do that, you got to have young people. And so we started bringing in top-notch out of fellowship or 1 or 2 years out of fellowship people who wanted to be mentored in our field and remain mentored for more than just a year of fellowship. And we brought them all on a profit-sharing model, which is a win-win for both the senior and the junior, and reduces the risk to the overall practice. And it's a really interesting business model, and it has succeeded in every single case. And it's allowed us to double the size of our group. So now we have an age distribution within our group, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Sadly, in a year, I'll be in my 70s. So, it is a very unique group.
Combination.
Now, in the process of that, as we, we're very open-minded. We're open to new ideas. For myself in particular, because I travel so much and I get patients from all over, I started quite a few years ago saying, okay, patients can come to me, but I can also go to patients. And you have to be prepared. I mean, it's a different model of medical tourism. And I've been doing itinerant surgery for a long time, going overseas and starting off with just seeing patients. Sometimes I'd see them at airports. Sometimes I'd see them at hotels. Sometimes I'd see them wherever. And then, then we'd send them cost estimates and they'd come over and have their surgery in America. But occasionally I would work with other doctors and, in host cities, and I would do surgeries overseas. I was doing this a lot in Israel. In fact, I had a relationship with the Israeli Health Fund, and where they'd bring me over to do surgeries over there. I did it for a while in Italy, in Germany, done it in UK, and it fitted into my private practice model that I could be paid overseas to do a surgery just like I could be paid at home to do a surgery. Now, sure, I did plenty of pro bono surgeries around the world. Don't get me wrong. I do pro bono surgeries at home. I do pro bono surgery around the world. But I'm talking about an extension of the employed work that I do. And so we started doing surgeries overseas, which is convenient for patients, but they still would pay for my services just like patients pay for my services at home. And so that model was kind of going on, and it has been going on for a while. What we had not done is set up a fixed base of operations. I did try to do that in Milan and then in Germany, and it was not sustainable there. The opportunity, first presented itself in Poland. And what was happening in Poland is that the National Health Fund of Poland, NFZ, was sending us a lot of patients. I'd say they were funding as many as 25 patients a year at the peak of all this. I even went and spoke with them and so on. And so I started setting up clinics in Poland to see patients, and this increased the number of patients I was getting from Poland. And in fact, very soon, I suddenly realized not only was I seeing Polish patients in Poland, but a lot of patients from other parts of Europe were now, because I was running regular clinics in Poland, were coming to see me in Poland. And, during one of these visits, I met this young surgeon named Deszczyński, happens to be sitting right here, and who volunteered initially as an interpreter for me. And at the time, his father is an orthopedic surgeon and didn't know much about the stuff I did. But presented me with the idea of, what do you think about setting up a clinic here in Poland? And we had talked that I'd tried to do this in Italy and Germany. He says, well, what about Poland? And honestly, I'd never thought of doing it in Poland. Okay. I don't know if it was a prejudice against the idea of doing it in Poland, or the opportunity had never arisen, or whatever it was. And, but I was coming to Poland regularly. And you know what? It was, I think I kind of blew it off initially. And I said, well, if you really wanted to do this in Poland, you'd have to come and do a fellowship with me. And so I really did blow it off initially. I kept coming to Poland to see patients. And, Michał, you and this other guy I never heard of, Tomasz, guess you didn't want to be lonely, who was a resident at the time.
Yeah.
Suddenly.
We both were.
Yeah. I finished my residency.
3 days after we traveled.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And my hospital finally.
You guys interrupted your lives, and you came to West Palm Beach to work with Dr. Feldman and myself. And, and again, initially still the idea of setting up an institute was really, not something that I was hot on for Poland. Mm-hmm. But as a credit to you guys, I think you said, listen, I've set things up for you guys to come, and we have a bunch of patients, and we'll do the surgeries at these 2 hospitals in Warsaw. And I think I even gave a lecture at Warsaw University.
That's correct.
And I was coming regularly to conferences and in Poland, and visiting professor like in Poznan and things like that. So we came and we did this, and I was surprised how well it went. I was pleasantly surprised, and so much so that I thought, okay, I'm willing to do this again. And so at that point, I think the tipping point was that you guys involved professional people, a lawyer to help, make sure we did this legally. Your brother who's, had a distribution company to make sure that this went well. And you got us appropriate licensure. So we did it again with proper certifications, and did it again. And, it became a couple time a year thing. And then we formally founded the Paley European Institute. So again, like any great idea, it doesn't happen overnight. It became an evolution. And I think over the course of 2018, it went from an idea to a reality. Yeah. And I think actually the idea came from the year before in 2017. And the rest is history. And, gradually as it grew, we went from, seeing patients, renting space in Medicover Hospital to getting our own offices and investing in our own practice. And then, and you guys did just a unbelievable job building, out the space and creating physical therapy and mimicking every aspect of the Paley Institute. So Paley Institute in West Palm Beach became your kind of template.
Correct.
Even the color scheme and so you extended our brand to Poland. And now if you come there, if you come to West Palm Beach, you come to Poland, you sense you're in the same institution. And you
feel
guys
like home.
Yeah. So it really, you sense that these 2 institutions are connected, and they are. the impetus of doing this in Poland stimulated me to consider other sites. And I, started investigating the Middle East. I started by looking at Dubai, and then, I don't know, I just couldn't make any inroads there. And then I went and looked at Doha, and again, just wasn't right. And then looked at Abu Dhabi. And we're getting a lot of very similar scenario. We're getting a lot of patients from Abu Dhabi, just like we did from Poland. So I started going out there and again, started doing clinics there. And through that process, I met Michael Uglo. And, with Michael, we started looking at different options. Then COVID hit, which kind of put us behind a couple years. But then when COVID abated, I went back. And then we went and checked out probably 5 different centers in Abu Dhabi and a couple in Dubai. And chemistry wasn't right, something wasn't right. And then serendipitously, the right group came to us as opposed to us going to them. And that's always better. It's kind of like you guys came to us. So when the right group goes to you, then I think that's one of the key chemistry things, is that if I'm the only one interested, it's not going to work. You have to have a partner who's interested in. And, so the Burjeel Holdings Group, who had numerous hospitals, including a new one in Abu Dhabi, came to us, and that happened in August 2022. And believe it or not, from August 2022, by December, we had a contract, and we opened our doors in January 2023. And it has just accelerated from there. It's been wildly successful there. And it's well supported by the Department of Health, and which is very helpful. I wish the NFZ would support us here the way, it'd actually be a very smart thing for them to do, but whatever. And that has been incredible. And then, now it's easy, by the way. After you've opened 2, I get knocks on the door all the time. I just don't have the time or energy or bandwidth to deal with it. But the next one that came our way was a group in Medellin, Colombia that I know very well, and I trained them. And I think the key in all these centers is the people there. Look, when you're going to do what's called itinerant surgery where you're traveling, you have to have boots on the ground. You have to have people look after your patients to do it responsibly. And, so here I have you guys. Over there I have Michael Uglo and now Ahmed Hamouda, both of whom I trained and are very good. And they do good surgery, just like you guys do, in your own right. And, and it's a good balance between what they refer to us and what they do on their own. So the center is sustainable because both are happening. If it was just waiting for me to come 3 times a year, the center would die. So you have to have sustainability. The group in Medellin had their own business, but they wanted this additional stuff. And so they studied the model in Poland, they studied the model in UAE, and we've set something up there. And I've started going there and doing clinics, and I'm going to do my first surgery there, by the way, next week.
Nice.
Nice. So it's
good to hear.
A little bit slower development there. But, and now we're, one of our partners, Munjid Almuderis, has a practice that he maintains in Sydney. And our goal is to brand that as the next Paley Institute and to get licensed to go down there and do some surgeries there, which extends our reach to 5th continent. So we've gone from being a large medical tourism center in the United States to now a multinational medical tourism center. In fact, I think if, can't 100% prove this, but I'm pretty sure we're now the largest orthopedic medical tourism center in the world. And we're unique in that if you look at other medical tourism groups in the world, or I shouldn't say medical tourism, almost really more, if you look at other companies that have opened up around the world, such as Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, okay, they're the classic two. For example, Abu Dhabi, there's the Cleveland Clinic. It's a beautiful hospital there. Okay. Mayo Clinic also had a place, so they also open up in different places. There's a very big difference. They're a franchise. Okay. We're a satellite. What's the difference? They're just semantics. No, they have local doctors with local practices practicing at their hospitals.
And this is just a brand, not the...
Correct.
Like McDonald's.
So I'll tell you my line on that in a sec, but that's why I call them a franchise. They do, in other words, the doctors that made Cleveland Clinic what it is today are not the doctors at Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. Okay.
Involved.
Yeah. So, my line to this is that's, paying for Michelin and getting McDonald's. When you come to a Paley Institute, if you want Paley, you get Paley. If you want Feldman, you get Feldman.
Correct.
If you want Dobbs or Asadi or Almaderis, these are all Paley Institute, Florida, the group that made it famous, doctors. They are traveling to do surgery and see patients at our various satellites. That's what makes them a satellite and not a franchise. Now, yes, we also have doctors that we trained. These are not some expat that didn't train in Cleveland Clinic. These are all doctors who trained with our primary doctors who are running the show, looking after the patients and doing surgery, okay, responsibly in Poland, Abu Dhabi, Colombia, soon Australia, and so on. And so you're either getting, the parents of the institution from Florida or their children. Okay. Yeah. But you're not getting a local. And by the way, great example, talk about orthopedic institutions. Okay. HSS, number one orthopedic hospital in America, according to U.S. News and World Report. They opened up a satellite in West Palm Beach, my town. Okay. That's why it's actually very relevant here. And what did they do? They hired local docs who had, these are private practice docs, not guys from up in New York, who have local good practices, and they brought those practices in. So a week before, those guys were non-HSS in the community practice, and now they live under the HSS brand name, and that makes them number one in America? Seriously? Okay. So, like I said, the doctors elevate their institutions. Okay. So we elevate our institution. You elevate your institution. This doctor suddenly that moved in from the community to HSS, do they elevate HSS? No. Okay. Yeah. And they may be very good doctors. I'm not saying they're not, but it's not the same thing. So patients who are coming for the brand name, okay, they think they're paying for Michelin, but they're maybe getting McDonald's. And that's how we're different. And, I'll leave it with that closing remark.
So you've mentioned that you include not only the perfect orthopedic practice at Paley Institute, but also physiotherapy, orthotics, psychologist, all the team that taking care of about the patient. So how, from the patient perspective, is to owning all the satellites around the world? Is it more convenient to the families, to the patient? Because last time we developed this name, family-centered care, when the patient is our son and we are like, satellites around the patient.
Around the sun.
Sure. Well, we have actually a name for that. We've branded the concept of Paley care.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of Paley care is a very holistic concept.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I think one of the reasons we've been so successful, and let me define success. Successful so we aim to control the product.
Mm-hmm.
What's the product? The product is the patient experience,
Mm-hmm.
which includes the outcome, the result, but not just that, but the whole patient experience.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's how they're coming for their appointment in the office, whether it's, the experience with the billing and collection department, whether it's their experience with making an appointment and somebody answering the phone, whether it's helping them find a place to stay
Mm-hmm.
in town, whether it's the experience in the hospital, the inpatient,
Mm-hmm.
the discharge,
Mm-hmm.
then the experience with, like you said, physical therapy, office visits, having braces made, radiology, all of this. And that is the product we want to control, because that's the product we want to deliver. We have an idea of. And the only way, so when I was employed by a university or a hospital,
Mm-hmm.
I had no control over the product.
Yeah.
I only had control over my own surgery and, nothing else. At the Institute in Florida, I have control over the whole thing. I work with a hospital and a hospital system that has a great working relationship with me. It is called Tenet Healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Tenet is a very large hospital corporation in the United States. It's actually a Fortune 500 company. It is, it owns many hospitals, has the largest number of outpatient surgery centers, and so on. And they've been great partners. They own our hospital. They are co-owners of our surgery center with us. We own half of it, they own half. We employ together many of our employees because they're shared employees of the hospital and the practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way we can work together as two separate corporations compliantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important in the United States. I'm sure also here in Europe.
Yes.
And this idea of Paley care and us controlling the environment required, for example, our operating rooms. We control them,
Mm-hmm.
but the employees actually belong to the hospital. And I'm not an employee of the hospital. I have to have a dotted line relationship. So I have control over the employment of those employees.
Mm-hmm.
So I can control the operating room environment to what it is. Okay. Now, technically they're paying for them. It's their employees, but I have to have that reporting relationship with their managers and this took a while to develop.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want a revolving door of anesthesia people. I wanted our own anesthesia people, even though they, because otherwise they'd be going to the hospital in the middle of my surgery and all this. I wanted efficiency. I wanted I don't want people taking breaks every 2 minutes and stopping the flow of patients in the operating room. I wanted, when patients arrive, to have certain concierge type of behavior. And, at every place and on the floor, I wanted to control the food service, so that no accidents would occur, that a Muslim patient might be given pork or something like that. These things could happen. Okay. So I needed to control the environment of every aspect. And I've worked with the CEO of the hospital, CFO of the hospital, the chief nursing officer of the hospital to develop this. I've reached a point that I control the entire product, one end to the other. This is what Apple did. That was Steve Jobs' famous line, end-to-end control. End-to-end control allows you to control the product that you deliver. Okay? It's not open access. Not everybody can mess with your product. I have a certain product in mind, and that's what we aim to do. By the way, other doctors love that. They love controlling the product too. They love knowing that they can control the product.
And they have influence to change
correct.
something.
And that they can work in that environment. So it is not just patient-friendly, but Paley Care is also for the doctors. It is very doctor-centric, doctor-friendly, and so on. Yeah. And it's good for the hospital too. So it is a very, very successful model. Every one of my satellite centers, I've tried to extend that philosophy and that approach. And it's a learning curve. You don't even though we have that model working well in the U.S., it doesn't mean you open up in Warsaw or in Abu Dhabi or Medellin and tomorrow it's like that. No, it has been an evolution. But that is the template that we are trying to pursue. And so we don't send them to outside physical therapy centers because we don't know what we're going to get. Okay, we need very specialized physical therapy. So every one of my centers, we built up the physical therapy. Had the lead therapist from US, Fran Guardo, who runs my therapy center, travel to Poland, travel to Abu Dhabi, etc., and train the therapists here. And she's a resource at any point to help continue that. Orthotics, prosthetics, we have a certain way of doing stuff, and we provide similar services at all of our centers, and so on. Way we take x-rays, even the radiology, again, very similar. So we have tried to establish this model, this template, this philosophy, and we don't stop our centers from innovating on their own and improving upon it. I mean, I think, for example, here in Poland, you guys have done some really neat things, created coloring books and other activity things for children and use a psychologist. And you do a variety of things that are add. I don't think they take away. They might be a little different than what we do, but they add and fit into this model. And so there's room also for each center to distinguish itself.
Yeah, because it's a difference, cultural differences, and you have to adapt, for
absolutely, absolutely. And so it has, but I think this distinguishes us from other practices. It's a very team approach, holistic model. Yeah. People feel they belong, and and there's a little bit of the culture of feeling like you're number one. Look, in limb lengthening, okay, I say this out of no arrogance, but most people will tell you that not only am I the most experienced limb lengthening surgeon, I've been doing it the longest, of anyone probably alive, and probably recognized as the number one limb lengthening surgeon in the world. But I can only be number one if the people around me act like number one. And while I may have earned it, the people around me get it. They're part of that number one team. But I'm only as good as my weakest link. So if my team doesn't act like number one, then the number one is not doing well. And I speak like that to all my employees and tell them, you're number one. By being here, you're number one. And I want you to feel and act and you need to portray your best side and your best activity and so on, because you're part of a very elite, special center. And, I think this is being done everywhere we are. Our Paley Institute in Europe, in Warsaw, in Abu Dhabi, in Medellin, all portray that very unique center. We're different. We really care, and that's, I think, that's why we're not franchises. That's why we're, just satellites, meaning extension of the mothership.
Yeah. You work on many fields like medicine, innovation, business. You're meeting many people, a lot of them every day. So how you take care of yourself? How your, how you have any, because everything is demanding. How you stay fresh mentally, physically, and how to handle these things.
Tasks.
Yeah, I mean, it's, look, I have never been given anything in my whole life. I've been a self-made person. I left home at 17. I became financially independent at 17. I never took another penny from my parents, who are wonderful people, but I was self-sufficient as soon as, I'd worked for many years. And so I think I do have a tremendous ability to handle responsibility and stress. I don't let things, I don't let things stop me. And I have a philosophy and an attitude that, turn every negative into a positive. Look for the silver lining in every cloud. So I'm a very cup half full, optimistic individual. I think that's how I get through and have gotten through every day in my life, and not every day has been a picnic. Okay? I mean, some of my hardest time is when, after 22 years in Baltimore, I was forced to leave the city where I raised my children. Okay? But turned into a blessing in disguise. As I said, beshert, destined to be. And it was my attitude that got me through that. And obviously I turned, who would have known that I would have then created this institute and ended up with the ultimate job of my life that I'm really still so excited about going to work every day. And I think part of it is that I just love what I do. I'm excited by what I do. Not just, I've always been excited about the medicine, always, I have the best job in the world. I get to improve the lives and save the limbs of so many children and adults. And it's such a good feeling, right? You go home after that every single day. And now I've got patients who come back 30 years later, and they won't trust anyone else to give them advice about, now maybe they need a hip replacement. I don't even do those operations. I send them, but they'll trust me to send them to the right person and so on. It's the ultimate compliment you can get, and you become part of the lives of so many families and so on. So it's wonderful. Look, I started when I was 43. I'm 69 now. I started really taking care of myself physically too, because you can't get through this otherwise. I started really changing. I was way overweight, probably 20 kilos overweight. And I lost all that. And I started preaching diet and exercise, and I practice what I preach. And I keep fit. I work out almost every day, weights and cardio. And, I hardly miss a day. Okay. Still, even here, I'm a week in Poland. I've been at the gym every single day. You guys know that every day.
We know that, yes.
or have a long walk.
And my younger people who have accompanied me have been sleeping in while I'm in the gym. Okay.
Or the łazienki,
walking around
the park. Łazienki Park.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's you have to do it. And I think, one of the few things, we don't have control over our aging, but it's one of the few things we do have control is maintaining our muscle mass and our cardio fitness. Right. And that we do have control over. So I work very hard at that, and, I try and eat right, and I try and I think you have to also work on your mental health, and which is nothing better for that than your family. And seeing your family, seeing your children,
how do you balance
your grandchildren,
and your family working so hard? Is it possible?
It doesn't happen naturally. You have to work at it, actually. And listen, I have a special challenge. I'm very blessed. I have 4 children. And I have the most amazing wife in the world. I even have the most amazing ex-wife in the world. Okay. And, and I have 3 incredible grandchildren. So I'm very blessed. And, my children are spread out. America's a big place. I got my oldest son is in Toronto. My middle son's in New York. My daughter is in San Diego, and my youngest, who just went to university, is, at Syracuse, New York. So it requires a lot of travel. And they're also great about coming to visit us. And Thanksgiving, everybody's coming to our place in Florida, and Christmas time, everybody's going to San Diego, where my daughter and my ex-wife lives. And I just don't miss those opportunities. And so those come first. And more, look, now I'm at the phase of my life where I'm taking a lot of time off. Okay? I'm taking a lot of time. But I'm still working hard. I just am efficient, and I organize it, and I balance all of those things, and I balance it with my passion to travel, with my passion to read.
History.
I read a lot of history, and I do my road biking and my mountain biking and my rock climbing. Those are my favorite sports.
And skiing. Right.
And my skiing. Yeah. Yes, my skiing. Yes, and very seasonal. So I just finished my last mountain bike ride. I went to Italy last week before coming here to Poland. I did 4 days mountain biking, even when it was cold, in Riva del Garda. Amazing place. Survived. Almost died there. Didn't even fall once. But I don't know how I agreed to ride those black runs. Anyway, shouldn't be doing that at my age. And now we're moving into ski season. Okay. Yeah. So, I make time. I've already planned all of next year. And if I'm blessed to stay healthy all year, I'll meet those plans. And what do they say? A man plans, God laughs. Yeah. So I do my best to plan these, great events. And I'm blessed that I have a wonderful relationship with my children and my grandchildren, and as I said, even my ex-wife, and I have a most incredible wife in the world. So like my daughter next year is taking off a year to travel and invited me to come join her for a month. I'm not turning that down. So I look forward to every opportunity I can, and I balance my work in between all that. And actually having all these international centers has worked coordinately and symbiotically with all this, because, I will, come and do something in Europe when I go mountain biking in Europe, and my daughter and I and her husband and my grandson are going to Africa, and I'm going to go to Abu Dhabi after that, so it's very easy. So it actually works out really,
There's opportunities,
really well. Yeah. But I like to be busy, and probably still too busy and trying to do too many things, but I've always been that way.
So, to our listeners, what kind of advice would you give for the young surgeons who wanted to become next Dror Paley? So, what needs to happen? All of those. Is it in the stars that, it's or you can have a choice, rhythm, script?
What I would say to people is a few things. First, you have to be open-minded. If you're closed-minded, too skeptical, you'll miss opportunities. Think of what Marvin Tile said to me, that I was going to waste my time. And if I hadn't pursued my dream, and by the way, that dream was costly. I had to fund myself for a 6-month fellowship in Europe, and I had to disrupt my life and travel with my family overseas, and and go do what I felt was important. Like you guys picked up and went to America for a year, right? And nobody paid you to do that. It was self-funded. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to do it. Invest in yourself, okay? And I invested in myself. Second, opportunity only knocks once.
Correct.
You better answer the door. When opportunity knocks, you have to recognize that it's opportunity and that there's somebody at the door. And you have to be a little bit risk averse. You have to take some chances. And especially if you're younger. Okay. I probably should not be riding down black runs at my age. Okay. That's not a risk I have to take. But if I hadn't answered the door when I heard about the Elizarov method, I wouldn't be where I am now. Okay. So you have to be prepared to be open-minded, listen for opportunities. And then I would say, and what I'm going to tell you now is not an advice that I followed myself, but that now that I've learned from my own journey, I would recommend to others, is try and recognize your own superpowers early. We all have different superpowers. Don't expect to have my ability to innovate. If you're an innovator, then great. Use that, pursue it, develop it. Listen, there are superpowers I wish I had. I'm not a politician. I'm not one of these guys who everyone loves. Can I tell you that I often wish I was. Life would have been easier. I wouldn't have to swim upstream so much. Okay. But other people have that superpower. My stepson is like the most popular kid no matter where he goes. And it's his personality. My middle son is the same way. And it's just like, I could study that all day long and I could never be that. It's just, not my superpower. So know your superpowers and develop those and use those. Okay. And, don't try to be what you're not. Okay. Try to be what you are. And there are great things that you can do with what you have. You just have to figure out what those are and how to use them. And lastly, again, I'm not sure one can learn this or not, but I think being cup half full, being optimistic, looking for how to turn every negative into a positive is a really good way to navigate through the challenges of life. And maybe that's also innate, kind of like innovation. And maybe I'm telling you something that if you don't have, you can't do. But I think one can change one's outlook and attitude. It may not be natural, but you can try and do this. I remember my partner, John Herzenberg, said, Dror, something bad would happen when we were working together, and he'd say, Dror, I've tried to see it. I don't see the silver lining in this bad thing that just happened. He says, can you help me find it? And I don't know. I can always see the silver lining. It may not be obvious initially, but I always find how there's something positive in every negative thing that happens. And that's how I get through it. So try and look for that silver lining, because we all go through challenges.
Continuing this, is there any single thing separating good surgeon from great surgeon?
Yeah.
I think all those things, that we mentioned actually are.
I think in terms, if you talk about being a great surgeon, what makes one? I think you want to go back and say, what makes one a great surgeon? And maybe if you define those characteristics, if you define the end goal,
exactly.
You might be able to aim for it.
Yeah.
So I think the great surgeons are, what are their characteristics? One is obviously technically they're good, And by the way, you could be technically good at arthroscopy and not good at open surgery. It's a very different skill set, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm a good arthroscopist, but I'm a really good open surgeon, open anatomy surgeon, or even percutaneous surgeon. So I think that technical ability is really important. Three-dimensional technical, that's a very three-dimensional thing. Okay. I've seen great physicians who are not great surgeons. They just don't have the technical ability. They don't have the 3D visualization ability. So I think 3D visualization is very important. Really knowing anatomy. Anatomy is your GPS. You got to know your anatomy. So the better you know your anatomy, the more potential you have to being a good surgeon. Surgery is a technical thing, like playing the piano. And even child prodigies have to practice. So you got to get a lot of cases under your belt. I think one common thing of all great surgeons, they've done a lot of surgery. Look, until recently, I was doing 800 surgeries a year for the last 30 plus years, almost 40 years. I know a lot of centers, university centers, where they're so research oriented and so on, and there's such limitation on operating time. The surgeons at some of these centers tell me they get one operative session a week, and their system is so slow, they only have one room, and so they have to follow themselves, and they can get 2 surgeries done in a week. Okay, they do some fracture work, but leave that aside. In terms of their elective surgery, they're doing 2 cases a week. Oh, and by the way, they only work 40 weeks a year. Do the math. That's 80 surgeries in a year. How can you get good at that? You'll never get really good. I do 10 times that amount of surgery a year. Okay? Maybe not in the last year or 2, because I'm now taking more time to myself. So now I only do maybe 400, which is more than most surgeons, but you have to do a lot of surgery. So get a lot of experience if you want to be a great surgeon. And then great surgeons make great decisions. So decision making is really important. And that's a tough one because decision making is experience based. How can you be a great decision maker when you come out of residency right away and you have no experience? You can't actually. The only way you can is by trying to learn as much as possible from other great doctors and learn off their decision making. So the people who only spend their time in the OR and never spend time in the office don't necessarily make good decisions. You have to get good decision making. And, there's a learning curve to everything. But if you want to be a great surgeon, you have to get through that learning curve. You have to start making good decisions. You have to be technically good. And you have to have a lot of experience. Okay? Every great surgeon is that. Now, there are some people who have great names, and I want to separate that from being a great surgeon. There's lots of people with famous names who never operate. Does that make them a great surgeon? No. Some people think they're great surgeons because they talk a lot, because they publish a lot, because they teach a lot. No, they're not a great surgeon. Great surgeons operate. Okay? So it depends. If you want to just be a famous surgeon, I want to separate that word famous surgeon from great surgeon. Okay, that's why I defined what a great surgeon is. Great surgeon is someone I want to go to if, God forbid, I need surgery. Okay? Someone who's done a lot, practiced a lot, thought a lot. It'd be nice if they published. Doesn't have to be. Some people, some great surgeons. You mentioned earlier David McIntosh. He hardly published at all. He was an amazing surgeon. Technically, amazing. Okay? Technically beautiful surgeon. Okay? He didn't publish much, but he did a lot. Oh my God, he was so experienced. His hands were amazing. He was operating in his 70s. And I had the privilege of working with him and in his 70s, near the end of his career, and he was amazing. Okay? He was a great surgeon. Okay? And so those are the great surgeons. There are other surgeons who are amazing physicians. They have really good decision making, but they can't operate to save their lives. There are other surgeons who do great research, and they're great contributors. Others who are great teachers. Okay? But they're not great surgeons. Surgeon means doing surgery.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, I want to make sure we understand one thing. A great surgeon is not just someone who thinks they're God.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Remember, God doesn't think he's a surgeon. So, no, great surgeon is someone who does great surgery. Yeah, being humble. A surgeon is doing surgery. And you want a great surgeon is someone who does great surgery for the right indications. Right. So makes good decisions, not just does good surgery.
Yeah. It's combined.
It is.
It is, yeah.
And, the sad thing is, when I look back at my career, so I finished my residency in 1985. So I've been an orthopedic surgeon for 41 years. 40 years.
I was born in 1985.
You were born. And you know, and I started my career in terms of my first employed job in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess 38, 39 years. When I look at my ability now, so by the way, I've always been worried about being an aging surgeon, what they call the graying surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
The graying of the orthopedic surgeon or of any surgeon is you worry about, what do we worry about the most? Two things: technical ability and cognitive ability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get a decline in either of those, you should stop operating. And I figured you go up on this curve, your learning curve, and you get to a point where you can't get any better and then it plateaus. But at some point, you start declining. I don't know if that's falling off a cliff or a gradual decline. I suspect most of the time it's a gradual decline. You know, you get a tremor, you know, whatever. And I read an article once that what happens is your operative times slow down. You take longer to do the same thing. So I monitor. My biggest fear is that everyone else will notice that I'm declining except me. And they'll be talking behind my back. And that's like a nightmare of mine. I don't want that. I want to ride off into the sunset long before then. Okay. So I have been monitoring ever since I read that article. I've been monitoring my operative time, how fast, how long it takes me to do a surgery, you know, and you know, and a lot of them I'm monitoring, especially. So by the way, everyone knows that when they're in the operating room with me, what I do as I walk out of the room is to say, how long since the timeout? I want to know how long it took. I don't do my closure, so I want to know from the moment of the timeout, which is a very, you know, discrete point, until I unscrub and I'm done the surgery. Okay? So without the closure. And the reason I need to know that is for two reasons. Number one is when I book my surgeries and I book the next surgery to go into the next, I'm fortunate I have more than one room. So I book the next surgery to go into the next room so that I can unscrub from the first one and then literally just walk into the next room, scrub my hands, and I'm ready. And patient's not waiting and so on. And also I'm not waiting. Okay. So I need to know those times. And I constantly updating my own like database of how long that takes. And then the second thing is my private personal reason for knowing is I want to know if I'm declining. It is my only objective measure of knowing if my operative times I'm still getting faster. Which is crazy, right? I'm 69. I'm still getting 69 and a half. I'm still getting faster, which means I'm still getting technically better. Okay. And I don't have a tremor and I haven't noticed any cognitive decline. I think that one's harder. You know, I'm not forgetting things yet, you know, and so on. But so I think that's really, you know, important. As a surgeon is to be aware of all this and then to quit
the right moment
before the right moment. You know, and before it's obvious to everyone else. So,
So recently, you received a Polish citizenship, and we just wanted to know personally, how did it feel for you? And
So yeah, thank you.
That's mean to you to be being Polish.
A year ago, I got my Polish citizenship, and then it took me believe it or not, I thought then you just immediately get a passport, but because I don't come here very often, it took me a little bit longer to get. But this week I picked up my Polish passport, which even though I have a certificate at home that I'm a Polish citizen, it didn't mean as much to me until I'm a card-carrying Polish citizen.
Yeah.
So it hit me. I think what I should give as a preamble is, first of all, so all four of my grandparents were born in Poland.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Good to know for our audience.
Yeah, all four of my grandparents, that's pretty Polish.
Yes, you can't be more than that. True.
And in fact, I have the passports of two of them. Okay. My father was born in Poland. Okay. And I come from a Jewish family. And as you know, there were many, Jews represented 10% of all of Poland. And by the way, 30% of all the people in Warsaw.
Correct.
Yes.
My family wasn't from Warsaw. They lived in eastern Poland, what now is Belarus. And although my father spoke Polish, he never spoke it with me, and I never learned Polish growing up. And I'm self-taught in Russian, so I do speak Russian. It's ironic that I started coming to Poland, and I gave the whole story of that earlier. So the idea of becoming Polish kind of evolved. I thought of it even before, but it wasn't as important to me. But now that I had a business in Poland, I was coming here 3 to 4 times a year. I have a lot of friends here, and then colleagues. And then kind of thinking back to my family, I thought, this actually has some symbolism to me. And I'm going to try and do it. I don't know how hard it's going to be. And, we got with a lawyer, and you guys helped me find the right person. And initially we got rejected because they didn't have the documentation on my father. My father's a Holocaust survivor. There's no his birth certificate, and because he was where now is Belarus, none of those documents are stored in Poland. And trying to get something out of Belarus, good luck.
Don't.
Right. And so then we petitioned the president of Poland, who granted my petition. And I was just shocked and said, this is awesome. Interestingly, I have a lot of family in Israel. And one of my cousins in Israel, so his mother was also my father's sister, was born in Poland. My father, his 3 sisters, and his mother survived. His father didn't. His father was the 13th child after 12 daughters, by the way. Okay.
Or went out.
Right? But imagine how many children, offspring there are from just that one family.
Exactly.
And his mother, 8 siblings. Okay? So the number of family members that I would have had in Poland is enormous. Of those, the only ones that survived the Holocaust were 4 of my grandfather's sisters who immigrated to America before the war. My father, his 3 sisters, and his mother, and 1 uncle, and his 2 children. All of them immigrated to Israel, to Palestine. All the rest, to our knowledge, perished in the Holocaust. Okay? And we don't even know where or who, which we don't know what concentration camp, or if they even made it there, or shot on the streets, or who knows what, right? Died in jail. My grandfather, we think, died in jail, a Soviet jail. Okay. So, so my cousin's outlook on all this, he says, what do you want to be a Polish citizen for? They're all anti-Semites. They're all this and that. Obviously not very, very kind remarks and so on. And I said, first of all, that's not true. And I said, I'm sure there is anti-Semitism, but I said, there's anti-Semitism in America too. And I can't look at life that way. And I said, I look at it differently. I said, you know what? Even if I take a cynical outlook at it, then here's what I would say. Yeah, try to kill us, but we're back. The Paleys are back in Poland. That's my cynical outlook. Okay? Basically, F you. Paleys are back despite what history tried to do to our family. And it's not a negative outlook. It's a positive outlook. And I'd rather be part of a positive future for Poland than a future filled with blame and resentment and, holding a grudge for the rest of my life. What does that accomplish? It's not part of that cup half full. I don't have that approach to life. And so my approach is positive, and being a citizen here is, to me, a very positive thing. I'm proud of it. I wish my father was alive to know about this. People ask me, what do you think he would think? And my father was a very positive person. I think that's where I got all this from. I think he would think it's great. I think he'd be very proud. And I'm now proud to be back in the land of my heritage. My family has probably lived in Poland for centuries, And, one of my missions is to eventually speak Polish, working on it.
Almost. It's like in the OR, there's...
in the operating room.
There's no problem with that.
I get along. I know the name of every instrument. I know all my numbers.
You can communicate with the techs. And
they actually have... Yeah. No, you're right. I do have no problem. And it's surprising every visit how much more I learn. It gets easier. Yeah. But no, it's one of my personal goals. And I'm proud to be, Polish citizen, EU citizen. I'm often more comfortable internationally, as you know, because I'm very much a citizen of the world. I have 4 citizenships. Yeah. And, so other people think I'm just a spy because I carry 4 passports.
Yeah. In addition, you speak multiple languages, like how many?
I speak 6 languages fluently, and I can get by in about 3 or 4 others. So I love it. I mean, anybody who knows me, that's such a part of my makeup is I'm just, a lot of people are uncomfortable in a foreign environment. I'm exactly the opposite. I flourish, and I was made for this. And I didn't know that, but I think as you get older, you get to know yourself better. And I very much love traveling, love being around foreign people. I'm not an America-centric individual. I love America, don't get me wrong, but I love the rest of the world, and I love traveling and knowing different cultures, religions, peoples, languages. It's what makes this life and world interesting. Beautiful.
Yes.
That's true. Okay, so maybe we can summarize it and go to our quick fire questions. What do you think about that? I think, so maybe...
we try to ask quick questions.
Short answer.
But small time for for thinking. Maybe that will be something different for you, but it's quite interesting for the audience and also for us. So maybe Michael starts.
So, morning person or night owl?
Both.
Listeners
Don't sleep much.
Music in the hour, classical or rock?
More on the classical side, opera side.
If not a surgeon, engineer or a pilot?
I crashed with my hang gliders. I should probably stay away from being a pilot. So, engineer.
Your favorite movie is?
Exodus.
Okay. And most used word in your hour?
Gosh, I've never thought of that one. I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay, so let's leave it for the
You tell me, what's most used word in my hour?
K-wire.
Oh, that's boring. That's going to be something else.
So, pierogi or pizza?
Pizza.
Polish winter or Florida summer?
Florida summer. Even though I grew up in Canada.
Most beautiful Polish place you've ever visited?
I really like Krakow.
Is Warsaw starting to feel like home?
Parts of it, yeah.
When you think of Poland, what's the first image is in your mind?
My walks through the parks in Warsaw.
Nice.
I've done so many of them.
Yeah. And about surgery, knowledge or intuition?
Intuition.
Cut once or plan twice?
What was-
Cut once or plan twice?
I do both. I don't know. I can't. It's. I do both.
Okay, that's okay. Work-life balance, myth or must?
I would say I got to work on it better.
And,
It's very important, and I'm still working on it.
who's the best teacher? Success
Or a failure?
Failure.
I'm not sure I understand that question.
You can. So, who's the best teacher? Can you learn more from the success or from a failure?
Oh, what teaches you the best?
Yeah.
Okay. No question, failure.
Biggest danger, ego or fear?
Ego.
Final advice in one sentence for young surgeon.
Be open-minded.
I think we came to the end. And so, Dr. Paley, thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. Your work has truly changed the landscape of modern orthopedics and given hope to thousands of families around the world. It's been an honor to talk with you and to share your vision with our listeners.
So thank you, Adel.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Dziękuję.
Thank you very much to our listeners. This was 2Doc2Talk. If you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, see you.